Greetings and salutations, everybody. Yeah, this video is a little bit late, posting it closer to nighttime instead of in the morning this Friday. This week just kind of got away from me. Lots of stuff going on. But anyways, welcome to another 80s Friday. So I told you I wasn't through with the 80s, you know, after revisiting The Return of the Living Dead a few weeks back, watching a Cinebinge reaction video for Night of the Living Dead, which is interesting seeing their first impressions of it, and revisiting Dawn of the Dead from 1978 for the first time in so long that I'd pretty much forgotten all of it and it felt like a new film. I wanted to, you know, after my break for Strange Darling last week, so be sure to check that one out. I wanted to continue through these zombie films, which is why for this week I checked out Day of the Dead from 1985. Now apparently this one had been kind of hit or miss with some people, but speaking for myself, I remembered always enjoying this one and being excited to sit down with it again, give it another watch. But for those who are new or just haven't seen it in a really long time, the synopsis is as follows. As the world is overrun by zombies, a group of scientists and military personnel sheltering in an underground bunker in Florida must decide on how they should deal with the undead horde, otherwise known as just living in Florida in general. But where I wasn't sure if Dawn was indeed like a direct sequel to Night of the Living Dead, but I kind of took it that way. This one, from what I can tell, is a direct sequel to Dawn, taking place about 7 years later. And like the Raiders in Dawn, or people in general later down the line in Walking Dead, one of the biggest dangers in this one is humans, you know, for the most part. Because for this situation, we have these scientists and their support personnel for their research and supply gathering and so forth, and the military who are assigned to protect them in this operation, all kind of there together at this bunker. Now, it sounds fine, but you take an already very stressful situation, you know, out and about in the world, you know, being overrun by zombies, and throw them into this claustrophobic confines of like an underground bunker, and you get kind of like a pressure cooker of sorts. The military has some regular stand-up guys, of course, but it also has some really pieces of work. And by work, I mean shit. Some power-hungry asshats are really questioning every decision the scientists are making and at every chance that they take. Now, of course, in some cases, they do have good reason to question this, as, for instance, one scientist is doing some really strange experiments on the zombies, which are not only really gruesome, but very risky, as he insists he can potentially domesticate them through conditioning. It's a really weird subplot going on. So you can understand the soldiers taking issue with any kind of resource being spent on that. But risks aside, that whole situation does provide a little bit of humor here and there, which is one of the reasons why I would feel that maybe some people were kind of turned off by this one, you know, seeing them recall, you know, because with these zombies, the humor comes from them kind of seeing them recall in some ways some aspects of their living time, you know, the time being alive. But worst of all, you know, there's this idea of using some of the fallen soldiers as these, you know, within these experiments as well. This aspect could really turn up the heat if that got out to the rest of the soldiers and could really escalate everything. Some of the civilians even talk about just deserting and running off, trying to find a secluded place to start over, as the tensions with the military have been slowly escalating more and more as certain characters were taken out. Now, you may have noticed a lack of mentioning much zombies, as in zombie hordes invading or sneaking through, you know, the real threat of the direct zombie besides the ones that were captured. And that's, you know, my second point on this one is that, you know, as far as what people may not like, is that for a good portion of this film, there isn't much zombie action going on. You know, it deals more with the situation these characters are in. But luckily, unlike that extended cut of Dawn, which ran on way too long, this one's not too long, only clocking in at about an hour and 40 minutes. So while it may drag here and there without there being as much zombie action, except some tiny little scenes here and there, as it deals more with the situation those characters are in, it does eventually kind of turn itself around, you know, where in some ways it feels like what we see later on in films or in shows like The Walking Dead, with the focus being more on those characters and a dramatic situation. Because it doesn't run as long as Dawn, when the zombie stuff does start to kick in, it really goes in full gear for our climax. And this is where I feel this film really shines in a very bright and bloody red. Most of my memories of this film had always been just like 2 or 3 scenes. Hands coming from the wall at the beginning. It's a scene that I still really think is awesome. One of the zombies through the conditioning is like listening to headphones. So it provides a little bit of humor and everything. but the third aspect is being that gore. Over the top for its time, for sure. I mean, we got Savini back for this one doing the effects, as well as Nicotero and Berger, who later on were the founders of K&B Effects and brought us shows like The Walking Dead, not to mention the multitude of other projects that they worked on. But the gore that they put in this one not only was over top for the time, but it really holds up as pretty extreme these days. Now, as I said during my videos about Terrifier, you know, gore for the sake of gore just doesn't do it for me. There needs to be a reason and a pacing within that, so I don't get desensitized to it or anything along those lines. And this one does that really well. Rather than heavy gore the entire time, we get some brief moments here and there along the way, and then what's basically like a big effects show at the ending with some really great scenes that were really intricate. They work in a lot of detail, you know, and like how it's all carried out, how it's paced, and especially that joy in seeing certain characters getting what's coming to them. That makes it all worth it. So while I can see some maybe not caring for this one if they wanted something which moves a bit faster earlier on, you know, more gore early on, for instance, and so on. For me, I felt it was a good balance in the film, because that character and situation building early on with little spots of action and gore littered here and there, and then ramping things up into overdrive for a really crazy and really gory ending made this one more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest little video of mine for Day of the Dead from 1985, which at the time of this video is available on several providers, including Shudder, Peacock, Roku, Canopy, Night Flight. So just check out that Just Watch app. It's the one that I use a lot on my phone. You go into Just Watch, you can put in whatever providers you have, and it'll search to see where these films are. If you don't have the provider, at least you'll know which one you can get if you wanted a trial or if you wanted to switch providers somewhere along the way. But yeah, so check out Just Watch. Find out what service it's on, if it's one that you already have, if it sounds interesting and you want to check this one out, or if it's just been such a long time, it's going to feel like a new film for you if you do a revisit. Anyways, that's all I've got for this one. I will link to my video for Dawn of the Dead at the end, as well as Elvira's presentation for Night of the Living Dead in just a moment, so be sure to stick around for those. Those links should be popping up in just a moment. And also be sure to do the whole like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, and I will see you in the next one.